one thing I like to do before I talk, or I give you my remarks, is I'm from the D.C. area, as I mentioned, and I had a good friend of mine and a board member who was on board the plane that crashed into the Pentagon on 9/11. And I share this because when I went to my friend Jake's memorial service, I heard for the first time in my life, because I'm Jewish, the prayer of St. Francis. And those words really impacted me. So what I like to do anywhere where I talk, whether I'm in Fairbanks, Alaska, or Burlington, Vermont, I read the prayer of St. Francis, and I preface it by saying, I'm Jewish, I'm not trying to convert anybody, even though we're in a church, but I do it more for the words and the meaning, because we're all here to be there for people. So if you'll indulge me, it's my honor to Jake and also the words of thanking you for being here. I didn't have to wear these when I first started doing it, but Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not seek so much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we were born to eternal life. And if you really boil it down, it's about being there for people. Healthcare, family, nothing is more important than that, because that's all we can do, and that's a lot. And sometimes we try to look for things and recreate the wheel. Can't be recreated. Love, family, that's what I'm going to talk about. That's what it's all about. So for me, as we started talking about, my journey began in 1992 when I heard the 5 most horrific words uttered to me, your mother has breast cancer. This month, my mom is a 24-year survivor. So I stand up here even more blessed to do this in my mom's honor and not my memory. Breast cancer devastates the entire family, as you all know if you're experiencing it. Doesn't discriminate against anybody. I thought my mommy was going to die, and I was 29 years old, and I used the word mommy on purpose because I was supposed to be a grown man, but I immediately felt like a little boy. Because when you hear that word cancer, you think somebody's going to die. It's normal, it's natural, and it's okay, because that's what we think about, and that's what we're afraid of. So the reason I do, my personal passion is my mom. Your all's passion is your family. But I really wanted to go back and share a little bit of the story, because I know when my mom was diagnosed, my dad, my brother, myself, and probably every man in this room who has been a caregiver at some point in time would want to switch places with that person who was diagnosed. We would have given anything to switch places with that person. You cannot. You can't fix it. But the most important thing you can do, and it doesn't get enough attention, and that's okay, but it's to be there, because that's what she wants. They want us to be there. We cannot fix it. I did a lot of soul searching during that time and since, and did some reading, and in Chinese, the character for crisis is the same as it is for opportunity. And in another life, when I was somewhat of an athlete, some people might dispute that, but when I was, Vince Lombardi had a famous quote, and I'll share it with you how I shared it at our big fundraising event in Washington, D.C., downtown, 5 blocks from the White House, 250 people there. I said, it's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get knocked up again. So there was a pause. I paused. I said, oh my God, did I just say what I thought I did? And it's okay, you can laugh, because I did. I said it exactly like that, but I was looking at my wife who had just given birth to our daughter. So I was able to recover, shared the reason why, and we were at another event in Baltimore that summer, and I did the same thing. And again, yes, I was looking at my wife, and I say that, the quote is not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get up again. But before I talk about the getting up process, the humor is critically important when it's appropriate, because you have to be able to laugh when you can, because it is a great tonic. But getting knocked down and getting up again, that's the journey. That's the beginning of it, middle of it, and the end of it. And it's something that it was instilled in me from my mom and dad, and I'm not saying what I'm about to say to pat myself on the back, or my brother, or our wives, but 95% of the time when my mother had to go for any appointment, we were all with her. Sometimes we had to take 2 cars, but she was never, ever, ever by herself. And I say that because that should be the norm. People will say, oh, that's great. I go, what's great about it? My mom was always there for us. It was our turn to give back to her. So that's my message when I talk to the guys. And I'll talk about it a little bit more, but the fear that we have to overcome. But as you mentioned earlier, and I swear it's in my remarks, it has been for 20 years, my mom didn't raise her hand and say, can I have breast cancer? Did not do it. As a son, I'm not going to raise my hand and say, oh, mom's got breast cancer. Should I help her? Should I maybe go to a doctor's appointment? The answer is no. The statement is, what do you want me to do, and when do you want me to do it, and I'll be there for you. I can't solve it for you, I can't fix it, but I will be there the best way I can as a son, because that's what I can relate to. And there is nothing more important than that. So that's how our journey began, and my question is, as I mentioned earlier to you, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? Who? Martin Luther King said, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. It takes a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. That's the 1 and the 1A with the prayer of St. Francis in this quote. Because one person can make a difference, one person does make a difference. And that's really what my challenge is, because there's so many great men doing amazing things. Again, men are wonderful caregivers when they're given an opportunity, but we're just not sure what to do oftentimes. It's not that we don't want to help, that we feel as if we have to solve it for you. And if you ask, and we'll talk about this when I meet with the guys a little bit later, is, ladies, you can tell me if I'm wrong. Well, maybe not. I don't like, no, I'm just kidding. You can tell me if I'm wrong. If somebody were to ask you right now to raise your hand if you want your caregiver to solve the problem for you or just listen, how many of you are going to say just listen? Wow, I got a lot of wanting to solve it. That's more, okay. All right, it must be a Southern thing. But no, usually most ladies will tell us they just want us to listen. And sometimes the listening is putting a hand on your leg, putting an arm around you, and telling you I love you. It's with your eyes. It's with the contact. People don't want us to solve it, and we're not expecting it to solve it. A couple stories about why I do what I do. When I was 6 years old, this was 1968. I was outside of D.C. I was in a department store. The department store's named Zayre's. And those little pencil sharpeners back in my day were 25 cents. And I asked my mother if she would buy this for me. And my mother said no, and I put it in my pocket and I sold it. So, about 6, 8 weeks, I don't know how much time had gone by, but I was young and dumb. And my brother was doing some math homework at the table, and he needed a pencil sharpener. And I said, oh, I have one in our room. I came out with the pencil sharpener. My mother goes, where'd you get that? So at that point, the story takes two courses. One, I'll joke around, because those that grew up in that era, she did not tell my father. Because if she told my father, I would still be standing since 1968 till today. The other thing I had to do, which has shaped my life, continues to, I had to go to the manager of the store at 6 years old the next day with that pencil sharpener and tell him that I stole it. If I'm in McDonald's and they give me back too much money, I give it back to them. If they don't charge me enough, I say, you sure you charge me the right amount? Because I've got my mother on one side, and I swear I hear the belt snapping on the other. So I'm not sure which is the greatest motivator, but both of them work. And then when my brother and I used to threaten we were going to run away from home, my mom would say, fine, no problem. Take off all your clothes, leave them on your bed, and go out the way you came into this world with nothing. Bye. I made the mistake of sharing that when my wife and I first got together. Now she repeats the same. No, I'm just kidding. She opens the door. No, I'm just... But what I've learned, and I've been, again, I've used the word blessed several times, and I have been honored to travel the country and meet so many incredible people, is what I mentioned a few minutes ago. Men do want to get involved, and men want to make a difference. And we're just not sure what to do. And what I like to think that we provide at Men Against Breast Cancer is a blueprint and a strategy. I don't have the answers. Don't have them. I have people ask me constantly, well, Mark, what are the top 10 things somebody can do as a male caregiver? And my response is that answer does not exist. Because, first of all, if somebody says to you or purports to say, well, here's the top 10 list, run away from that person. Run away from them. Because the top 10 list is what works best for your family. Not for mine, your family, your family. That's what works best. However, in real estate, you hear about location, location, location. When it comes to being a caregiver, she needs to know you love her, you love her, you love her, and you're going to be there for her every step of the way, side by side. There, you create your own top 10 list. Because as you're talking about that list, you're communicating, you're getting closer together, you're talking about things that need to be talked about. And again, this is not easy. This is very hard. This is difficult. But it's something I share with guys. There are very few absolutes in the world, but stepping up and being there for somebody you love is one of them. Yes, you hear about the knuckleheads. You hear about the guys that don't step up to the plate. I see several men in here that are amazing. They're here. They're here. Guys, when they step up to the plate, are amazing. So when we first started Men Against Breast Cancer, this was 1999, we had a focus group with Hopkins, and there was 8 couples, married men and women. So one of the concerns was, well, will the men talk? Well, I can share with you, when men are given the opportunity to talk, they will talk. My opinion is I think they do better with a peer-to-peer setting because they hear other people and what they've experienced, and then they can share similarities. So the men talked. We were 15 minutes late meeting back with the women. So the one thing as a layperson that really struck me was each man was asked to grade himself as a caregiver, and conversely his wife to grade him. Okay, this is another pop quiz. Raise your hands if you think the men gave themselves a lower score as a caregiver than his wife gave him. Who thinks the men gave themselves lower scores? To a man, each woman gave her husband a higher score than he had given him. Now again, as a layperson, what showed me a little crack in the communication and further solidified my belief in what we wanted to do with Men Against Breast Cancer is, it's not right or wrong, but communication, ladies and the guys here, is a two-way street. It's incumbent upon both people to be able to communicate openly and honestly. Has to happen. So, generally speaking, I'm not speaking for all men, but generally speaking, ladies, just so you know, if a guy pulls back and shuts down and he's coming across to you as aloof and uncaring, I'm going to go out on a limb and say he feels as if he's failing you because he's not solving it for you on his own. So he shuts down because he thinks he wants to solve, because he loves you so much that he's not solving it on his own. That's what's happening most of the time. But ladies, the response was, well, he knows that I know that he's doing a good good job. So in other words, you're expecting him to read your mind. Right? That's okay. But you can't expect it vice versa either, because it works both ways. So, but the other point with that is, guys, we can't be afraid to ask, how am I doing as a caregiver? What else do you need me to do? But ladies, don't assume he knows it. Tell him you're doing a good job. I really love the fact that you're here for me. And then it would open him up to say, well, what else can I do for you? And before you know it, your blueprint, your strategy, your top 10 list is on the way. It does happen, and it does matter. See that guy? You see that? That's supposed to be a bicep. Can everybody hear me okay? So he's trying to do this. She's looking at it. Now, I'm in church, so I'm going to be careful what I say next. She's trying to say, what the are you trying to do and impress me? But the takeaway for that, for the guys and the women, is what women have told us, what they're looking for, this is not a sign of strength to them. They're not expecting us to have the stiff upper lip and grin and bear it. Put your arms out and give them a hug. That's a sign of strength. Her arms will uncross and come towards you. Okay? So I show you that slide in the context of the next one. My favorite slide. So, thank you for laughing. I'll buy you lunch like I said I would afterwards. All the time. So, guys, did you think you had the remote control prior to a diagnosis? Did you? Really? Honestly think you had the remote control? No. Do you think he really thought he was the king of the jungle? Seriously? That's the person that runs the jungle, runs the house. So my question to the guys, you don't have to raise your hands. I know the answer to this one. How many of you have felt that roar today? Come on, guys, put your hands up. I've talked to my wife a half a dozen times, and I felt it 6 times. And I'm talking about on the phone. Okay? And I love my wife to death. So the question is not whether you're going to get the roar. The question is, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to step up to the plate and be a wise and courageous guy, take the chance, ask the questions that need to be asked, let her know you're going to be there for her every step of the way, or are you going to shrink up to the cage? Now, I'm not telling you you're not going to shrink sometimes, and that's okay. That's normal. That's natural. But once you've gotten past that, you sit down and talk about it and go, well, that one was pretty loud, dear. I think I get the remote for an hour on that one after that. But it's what are you going to do with that? Because it's going to happen. I mean, that's life. And when you're on a journey and you're navigating a life-threatening disease like breast cancer, there's no preparation for that. None. So there isn't, again, nothing for you to look at other than what works best for you. And men and women together are great. We just have to be sure what we want to ask and how we want to do it, because that's what matters. So we talk about how men and women tend to befriend in a different way. And we'll talk about this. I wanted to share a little bit with the ladies of what we're going to talk about with the guys. And so let's say my wife and I were going to a party, and God forbid she had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and fictitious, and up to going to this party, and there were 20 other couples at the party. Within 10 minutes, every woman in that room would know my wife had been diagnosed with breast cancer because she would have told them, whether she knew them or not. We are socialized differently to tend and befriend. So if the roles were reversed and we went to the same party and I had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, not only wouldn't anybody else in that room know, my wife might not even know. Because again, it's back to that stiff upper lip instead of reaching out and sharing. And those are things how we're socialized. And it's starting to change, some of the changes I've noticed over the years. Again, it's okay. It's okay to cry in front of the person you love. Again, that's a sign of strength. That shows you're afraid. Normal and natural. You should be afraid. Cancer sucks. All of them do. And for me, I will stand up here till I'm blue in the face with respect to final decision on treatment. Breast cancer is a family issue. Take my mom out of that picture, no family. None. Today, still, my mom's going to be 80 years old in September, and a few years ago I was in San Diego doing a workshop, and she had to go in for an additional mammogram. I flew home. I still felt like a little kid. It doesn't change. I mean, my mom's going to be 24 years out, and when she said, breast cancer does not define who she is, and it's going to be a part of her the rest of her life, but there's going to be a life. And that is critical, absolutely critical. So, how do we engage? Some women will say to me, well, the person I love doesn't talk. He sits there, stares at me. Well, do you ever ask him how he's doing? You ever say, hey, what's going on with you? I'm a little upset, I'm concerned, instead of saying, how come you never talk to me? Something wrong with me? And it works both ways. But what I would say to the ladies is, if your husband says something to you about, well, you just had treatment, you're okay, let's go out for a walk. You going to want to talk to him? No. So if you were to say to him, how come you can't look at me in the eye? What's wrong with me? Something wrong with you? You can't look at me in the eye? He's going to pull back and shut down because he's just been attacked and criticized. And it may be a valid criticism. And it may very well be valid. Instead of saying, it really hurts my feelings when we sit down that you're not able to look at me. And the guy can also say, and again, it's a two-way street. But ladies, guys, we're socialized. We go to a baseball game. We go to a football game. We're side by side. We're not staring across each other's eyes at a bar having a beer talking about the game. Talking about War Eagle or Roll Tide. We're not doing that side by side. So some guys do have an issue with looking somebody in the eye, and that's okay. So, one of the things, again, we'll talk about the guys, if that's a problem, start out sitting across from each other. Put your arm on her shoulder, your arm on her leg. And then as you get comfortable, you work it around till you're sitting side by side with your arm around her. Those are little things that you can do that do make a difference. Do make a difference. The other thing is, it's a fine line that guys walk as a caregiver. One of the worst things we can do, and not necessarily done with any bad intent, is be too much of a caregiver. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's say, and I'm sure this may have happened in some of your all's situations, that your husband ends up doing the cooking. Okay? And let's say you're in the family room watching TV and he's cooking and you feel good that you want to go in there and help. And you go into the kitchen and you say, hey, what can I do? 5 minutes, we're moving. Thank you. So, what can I do? So instead of rushing her back into the family room and saying, don't worry about it, I got this, if you stop and you put yourself in her shoes, the message she's giving you is, wow, with all the stuff that's running through my body and as bad as I feel, I want to help. Let me help. That's the message. So she may not be able to physically help you prepare it. Maybe she can get the table ready, or maybe she can cut vegetables, or maybe she can just sit there and hang out with you. Give her that sense of normalcy, because you've got a normalcy in something in which case there is no normalcy. So our ribbon, as I mentioned, our ribbon is pink and blue. Shows it's a partnership between men and women. It's a fight we must face together. Men Against Breast Cancer, bittersweet to me. We're still the only national nonprofit whose primary mission is to educate and empower men to be there for the women they love. So it's bittersweet. It's nice to be part of something that we were the first, but again, why? There's organizations that have has a tenet, but why? I go back to 1 word, family, 2 words, being there, 3 words, what's more important? When caregiving, when it gets bound to that, men, if you're a good caregiver, you're going to improve the quality of her life because she can focus on her treatment. What's more important than that? Nothing. So to me, the real heroes, each and every one of you. I go back with something special, albeit no barbecue, but I go back with something special from each and being here, because you guys are really incredible, and I'm looking forward to working with the guys. A couple of quotes that I'm a big quote person, if you haven't figured it out. Helen Keller said, "It's better to walk in the dark with a friend than to walk in the light by yourself." You start this journey out, everybody in the dark. You need someone to hold your hand. And as you come out into the light, you're holding hands together. That's the best, being in the light with a friend. And Jay Kruger said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you make them feel. And the last thing I want to leave you with is more of a challenge, and I wish I could take credit for this, but a person named Art Williams said, I'm not standing up here telling you it's going to be easy. I'm up here telling you it's going to be worth it. So thank you for your hearts and souls, and I look forward to seeing the guys and talking to you guys later on.